Dinah Miller, born in 1848, was 11 years old when she, along with her parents and brother, were taken from what is now known as Benin, Africa. They were transported to Mobile, Alabama by way of the Clotilda. The Clotilda was the last slave ship that sailed into the country. In 1808, a law was passed banning the Atlantic slave trade. Despite the law, Timothy Meher bet another wealthy man from New Orleans that he could smuggle bodies into the States. Captain William Foster, working for Meher, departed Mobile in May of 1860, arriving in Dahomey, Africa on May 15th. From an African prince, he purchased 125 prisoners. They were said to be men, women, and children from north-central Nigeria. Steamboats off the port scared Foster into only securing 110 of the prisoners on board the ship. On July 9, 1860, the Clotilda docked in Grand Bay, Alabama. Afraid of detection, Foster waited for the cover of night to bring the Clotilda to Mobile. He had it towed through the Spanish River to 12 Mile Island. Upon arrival, the two-mast schooner was burned and sunk to avoid them being caught. 110 enslaved were sold to owners all over the state of Alabama, with at least 30 of them remaining in Mobile. After the Civil War, which started just a year after they arrived in America, Cujo Kazula Lewis and 30-some-odd formerly enslaved Africans, unable to return home, founded Africatown, now known as Plateau in Mobile, Alabama. They built a community in Mobile that continued the traditions and practices of their West African home. Cujo lived in Africatown until his death in 1935. Sally Smith, formerly enslaved in Dallas County, Alabama, was thought to be the oldest living survivor, lived until 1937. In 2020, researchers uncovered Matilda McCreer, who lived until 1940. Just 2 years old when her family was captured, Matilda lived to be 82 years old in Selma with her granddaughter Emma. 11-year-old Dinah ended up in Wilcox County alone after being sold to an owner from Snow Hill, Alabama, never to see her family. Dinah Miller was the first documented quilter in Gee's Bend, reportedly bringing the tradition with her from Africa. Her enormous quilting legacy continues to this day. It is unclear who once owned Dinah or how she ended up in Snow Hill. Ironically, her capture offered future women of Gee's Bend their financial freedom. Dinah married Gasaway Miller in January 1872, and they relocated to Gee's Bend, Alabama in 1890. They had 5 children together. Their son, John Henry Miller, worked as a foreman for the Vandergraffs at the Petway Plantation. His second wife, Gertrude, was a quilter. Their daughter, Sally, was a highly sought-after midwife in Gee's Bend and a quilter herself. Sally Miller met Esai Petway in Camden, Alabama, where she worked as a domestic. They married in 1898 when Sally was 22 years old. Sally was the go-to faith healer for residents of the Bend long before any medical services were available to them. Sally had 14 children with her husband Esai and, of course, taught all 10 of her daughters to quilt. 3 of her daughters, Missouri, Ella, and Lou D., are famous Gee's Bend quilters. The eldest of the quilting sisters, Missouri, worked on the farm with her family as a child and married Nathaniel Petway when she was 18. She had 12 children with him. Her husband had her stay home and care for their children, and that's when she took to quilting. Teaching all her daughters to quilt, her daughter Arlanza was a Gee's Bend quilter and the keeper of the family history. Arlanza, just 7 when Grandma Dinah died, remembered her stories of Africa well. If not for her keeping and passing the stories along, we would not know our history the way we do today. Arlanza worked in the fields with her siblings as a child and married quilter Jenny Petway's son, Bezel, when she was 20 years old. They were farmers, and Arlanza was a crafter, a builder, and a quilter. She was just naturally good at making things. Arlanza and Bezel had 12 children. Bezel and Arlanza would raise their children and some of their grandchildren in their rich quilting legacy. As his mother Jenny and grandmother Jorina were famous quilters, Arlanza credits her mother-in-law for her artistic freedom with her quilts. At first being a slave to patterns and aesthetics, Jenny taught Arlanza lazy gal, house top, and hog pen pole techniques. Jenny showed her how to use her imagination and follow her instincts, and Arlanza never looked back. Arlanza's work has been shown in collections at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and the High Museum of Art. She was one of 10 quilters commemorated on U.S. postage stamps in 2006. She was a founding member of the singing group The White Rose and the Freedom Quilting Bee. She has appeared on multiple radio and television programs and was an active community member and quilt maker until a stroke in 2006. Arlanza passed away in 2008. Missouri's younger sister, Ella Bendoff, was also a part of her quilting circle, along with their younger sister, Lou Dee. Ella married Patrick Bendoff Jr. and had 13 children with him. As was the custom in Gee's Bend by this time, Gran raised most of my grandmother's children. Her in-laws, Indiana and Patrick Sr., primarily raised her children. So I'm not sure if my grandmother Delia learned to quilt from her mother, grandmothers, aunts, cousins, but more than likely all of the above. I do know she quilted until she couldn't anymore. Their eldest sister Minerva has quite the quilting legacy of her own. Her daughter Pearlie Kennedy Petway's children remember her as a quilter who cooked and cared for her and her husband Horace's 16 children. Her son, Robert, who now runs a farm in Gee's Bend with his wife, Mary Letha, who is a quilter herself, remembers his mother making their mattresses of corn shuck and quilts to keep them warm, and their father in the fields. His son, Andre Petway, runs Mary's Dirt Road Tours in Gee's Bend, offering tours of the farm and quilters' homes. Pearlie's daughter, Florida, remembered her mother's biscuits more than her sewing and quilting. She did remember her mother's quilting circle that included her father's sisters, Mary Elizabeth Kennedy and Melissa Petway, and cousins and friends, Nettie Kennedy, Ella Bendoff, Magdalene Wilson, and Arcola Petway. Florida's daughter, Tangela Irby, is the author of Pearl and Her Gee's Bend Quilt, Charles and His Gee's Bend Quilt, with quilts based on her Aunt Mary Letha's quilts and characters named after her grandmother and uncle, and Preserving the Legacy, a Black woman's ancestry journal to faithfully guide the next generation, all available on Amazon. Sally's younger daughter, Mary, had a daughter with Prissy Carson's son, Famous. Loretta Petway was mostly raised by her Uncle Tank and his wife, quilter Candace Mosley, with the help of her grandmother, Prissy, and her father and his wife, quilter Plummer T. She even lived with her Aunt Missouri for a while before marrying her husband and starting her family. Despite having no desire to quilt and only starting after she married and only out of necessity, today Loretta is one of the more celebrated quilters of Gee's Bend. In 2015, along with Mary Lee Bendoff and Lucy Mingo, Loretta Bendoff was awarded the National Heritage Fellow from the National Endowment for the Arts. Sally and Esai's daughter, City Orland's son, Richard, married quilter Linda Petway. With Linda, he had 2 daughters that are today Gee's Bend quilters. Lucy Witherspoon and her sister, Gloria Hoppins continue their father's quilting legacy. Sally and Esau's youngest son, Tank, married quilter Candace Mosley. They had 16 children of their own and helped raise their niece, Loretta. Candace worked as a helper in the Gee's Bend Elementary School, and when she got too sick to work, she got together with her quilting circle that included Ollie Petway, Lucy Mingo, and Lola Petway under a tree in her yard and quilted until the day she died. Their daughter, Quinny, learned to quilt mostly from her mother, Candace. She would go on to learn patterns from Maddie Ross, Estelle Witherspoon, and her sister quilter, Sally Mae Mixon. Quinny was a longtime employee of the Freedom Quilting Bee before its disbanding in 2012. Her sisters, Sally Mae Mixon and Edwina Petway, are also longtime Gee's Bend quilters. Quinny married Tom O. Petway Jr., and their daughter, Loretta Petway Bennett, is today one of the most known quilters in Gee's Bend history. Loretta married quilter Agatha Bennett's son, Levette, when she was 18, and after traveling with her military husband in 2002, she saw the Gee's Bend exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. She started seriously quilting, often collaborating with her mother in 2003 to 2006. Today, Loretta and her sister-in-law, Marlene Bennett Jones, host hundreds of quilt enthusiasts per year with their joint venture and collaboration with Vacation with an Artist. She is also the owner and operator of Levette's Place, an Airbnb in Gee's Bend. Loretta's work can be found on Etsy, and Loretta and her fellow Gee's Bend quilters can be supported at the airing of the Quilts Festival, October 12, 2024, in Gee's Bend, Alabama. From Africa to slavery to Gee's Bend to museums around the world, Dinah's descendants continue to make their mark all over the world, and I could not be more proud to be in that number.